Hey everyone. So, where do we go from here? So, if you've actually watched all of the videos up to this point, then you should be in a pretty good spot. And not just watch the videos, but actually gone through the lessons yourself. So, the reason why I made these videos is really more of an answer key than anything else. Just watching these videos is not going to help you learn Russian, okay, it might help you learn Russian, but it's not the right way. Just sitting and watching these videos is not the right way to learn Russian. Um, what you need to do, I think I've emphasized this before, but now that we're at the end, I'm going to emphasize this again. What you need to do is to go through all these lessons, all these 100 lessons yourself. And I would say more than once, because the first time you're just kind of getting used to the concepts. The second time you understand the concepts and you actually start to work with them and really practically apply them. So ideally, at this point, you should have gone through all the 100 lessons on the Learn Russian website yourself, not just with help from this video, but having done all of them by yourself at least twice, I would say. That sounds very demanding, and yes, it is. But learning a language is demanding. It's a lot of work to learn a language. It's not simple, and Russian is an especially difficult language. It's more difficult than Western European languages like French or Spanish or German. So it's tough. Learning Russian is tough, no doubt about it. But if you've actually done that, if you've really gone through all the lessons on the website and really kind of grasped the concepts very thoroughly, you have a problem. Like you have one of the biggest problems that most language learners tend to run into at some point is that you've learned a lot. You now know maybe not everything, but most of the things that there are to know about Russian grammar principles. You know the different grammar rules. You don't know everything about grammar, but you don't have to know everything about it. You know really like the vast majority of things that you will probably ever really need to know about grammar in Russian. But what you're lacking is a vocabulary. Your vocabulary is still lacking because how many words do you know? I mean, if you're lucky, you might know a couple of thousand words at this point, which is a good start. I mean, don't get me wrong, 2,000, 3,000 words, that's a really good start. That's actually a pretty strong vocabulary for like for people at an intermediate level. But if you're going to start having regular conversations, like everyday conversations with native speaking Russians, it's going to be very difficult because there will constantly be words that they use which you don't know. You don't know those words, or there'll be something you want to say and you don't know the word for what you want to say. And that's the problem that all language learners face eventually because any language, any native speaker, I mean, whatever your native language is, I don't know what your native language is because there might be different. I mean, I would say I'm a native English speaker myself. I assume that most people watching these videos probably speak English pretty well because I speak in English during the videos. But whatever your native language is, you probably know thousands and thousands of words. A fairly, let's say, basic or a fairly average person probably speaks between 10,000 and 20,000 words in their native language, maybe even more. But let's say between 10 and 20,000. That's kind of a decent baseline. Now that's a lot of words. Learning 10,000 to 20,000 words, that is one heck of a lot of words. It takes a long time. And that task, learning thousands and thousands of words, it really is much bigger. It's a much bigger task than anything you need to learn about grammar or sentence structure, things like that. And so that's why when you start getting into more advanced stuff, you will have this problem that you know the structure of the language pretty well. If you've practiced a lot, hopefully your pronunciation is pretty good at this point. And if you've been paying attention to the lessons, then hopefully you know most of the grammar concepts, but you just don't have the vocabulary. And that's always going to be a problem. Learning vocabulary is the single biggest thing about learning a language. I mean, even in my native language of English, I still sometimes see words that I don't know. I might be reading a novel and it might contain a word that I've never seen before or that I just don't quite know the meaning of. Then I have to go into a dictionary and look it up. I mean, that's normal. Even in your native language, you'll see words that you don't know. So it's never really finished. This work is never really complete because, a fully developed language, like a language like Russian or any other language with a long history, has well over 100,000 words in the whole, in the whole body of the language. And even native speakers are not going to know all the 100,000 plus words that are in their native language. So you never really stop learning vocabulary. You just get better and better at it. So where are we now? I would say that so these videos have been obviously about the Learn Russian website. So it's learnrussian.rt.com. This website takes you to, I would say, probably something like a B2 level in terms of the concepts. But if you were really a B2 level right now, you could now read a Russian newspaper without difficulty. But if you try reading a Russian newspaper now, you'll have the usual problem of people who have learned a foreign language to the B2 level, which means you'll know the language concepts, but your vocabulary will still be lacking. There'll still be lots of words that you don't recognize. If you don't know what I mean by B2, basically in Europe now there's sort of a general framework for languages that or language abilities that specifies people's language abilities into 6 different levels. So there's A1 and A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. If I were to characterize these very broadly, I would say A1 and A2 is kind of tourist level. This is kind of like, you're not having deep conversations, but this is basically for people who want to travel to the country. They want to be able to use basic phrases, not discussing anything really too detailed or complex, but to be able to have simple everyday conversations in language. This is what the A levels are. And A1 is like you're a beginner, you're not that strong, but you can say some things. Then A2 is kind of like, if you're a good A2, if you're really like a solid A2, you could go to Russia, go to a Russian hotel and say, I'd like to book a hotel room for the night. What will it cost? Okay, I'll pay for it tomorrow or something like that. You can go to a restaurant and say, I want this kind of a dish. I want to order this kind of food. When will it be ready? How long do I have to wait? You can go to a movie theater and say, I want tickets to this movie. Stuff like that. That's basically what we're focusing on there. The B level is, I want to say kind of like, it mostly appeals, I think, to business people. That might not be true, but you know how there are like business language courses? This is kind of like that. This is basically, you're not going to be discussing great literature or philosophy, but this is kind of like the level that you want to be at if you're going to have business meetings in this language. So you want to be able to travel to a country and say, we have a project going on, and the project is going to cost, I don't know, 20 million euro or whatever, and it's going to be ready by I don't know, by next summer, and we have these people working in the team, stuff like that. It doesn't have to be for business people. It can also be for people who want to live in the country. If you are an expatriate or an immigrant and you want to move to a country, typically you'll probably start at the B levels. I mean, C is better, but usually the B levels are kind of the minimum requirement to immigrate to a country. Like if you want to apply as for the citizenship of a country or something. Typically, the B levels are where you'd want to be for that. So this is basically a step above for being a tourist. This is somebody who either will live in the country or will have very frequent dealings in that country at a level where you need to be more than just a beginner. So this is kind of you could call it intermediate, but actually if you're a solid B2, like if you're a really solid B2, I would say being a really good B2 is more advanced than just what intermediate would apply. If you're a really good B2, then you can have everyday conversations in the language fairly fluently. And C levels, I mean, that's basically the sky is the limit. So C levels are usually what you require if you want to study at a university. This is the language for educated speakers. So there's a lot of debate about exactly where these limits get drawn. So don't understand these as hard and fast limits. Different people will define these very differently. That's just kind of how I see it. So coming back to the Learn Russian website, which has been the focus of these videos, I would say it takes you pretty well to B1 or B2 in terms of grammar concepts, in terms of most things. And really, once you've finished B2, like if you've actually finished B2, I would say you're done with grammar. if you've really finished B, and not just for Russian, but in any language, in most languages, if you've finished B2, that means you have nothing more to learn in terms of grammar because the C levels are more about really fine tuning your language. This is more about extending your vocabulary beyond 10,000 words, picking up different phrases and figures of speech because every language has idioms and figures of speech which you can't understand literally. You have to be familiar enough with the language to actually understand, like, phrases, like, I don't know, just for an example in English, you're pulling my leg. Well, obviously, when somebody says that, what they mean is you're kidding me. They don't literally mean you're pulling physically on their leg. It means you're kidding me. Stuff like that. Expressions, things like that, which are not obvious. You just need to have enough exposure to the language to know these figures of speech that native speakers will recognize, but foreigners might not recognize. That's more what the C levels are about. So if you're done with the website, with the Learn Russian website, we have had some stuff about figures of speech. They did actually talk in the last few lessons about it was actually all about figures of speech of different expressions relating to people's personalities. But I would say that we're probably at like B1 or B2 now, having gone through the website, which is not a bad place to be. Again, C1 and C2 is more about it's more about like usages of the language. It's practical usages of the language. It's not about structure of the language. So having learned all the grammatical rules, I'd say you're pretty solidly in B territory. Um, and yeah, where do you go from there? That's the thing. That's why I'm making this video to kind of talk about where it goes from here because if you're a native English speaker, learning any Slavic language like Russian is it's much harder than learning a Western European language, not only because Slavic languages are more difficult, they have more difficult grammar, but also Slavic languages don't have much lexical similarity with English. If you're a native English speaker, you will find it relatively easy to learn a language like French or German because English has a huge amount of influence from both of those. A lot of French loanwords crept into English, and English has something like 50% of English words have some shared etymology with German words. So there's a huge boost there if you want to learn either of those languages. But Slavic languages tend to not have a lot of loanwords from Western languages and not a lot of shared etymology with, for example, Latin. Like English has a lot of Latin-derived words, Russian doesn't. I would say the lexical similarity between Russian and English is maybe around 10 or 20% at most. Now, of course, if you already speak another Slavic language, like let's say Polish or Czech, then you will definitely find Russian much easier because the vocabularies overlap a lot. There's a lot of overlap between different Slavic languages. But if Russian is your first Slavic language, which will probably be the case for most people, then yeah, the vocabulary is the one thing that will really give you trouble all along the way. And again, I want to emphasize, you're never done with the vocabulary. Even in your native language, you probably don't know 100,000 words. So in any language, you're never really done learning the vocabulary. That's the task of a lifetime. So, yeah, and these C levels, I mean, let's be fair. The C level exams um, are sometimes difficult for native speakers. So there are different Russian exams. Like if you want to take a Russian language certificate exam, there are various Russian exams, but the standard one, kind of the one that probably most people will want to go for because it has the most prestige, the most recognition, is in English it's called TORFL, Test of Russian as a Foreign Language. In Russian it's called, I think, uh, ter, um, ter, Terki, Test Русский язык как иностранец, which means test of Russian language as an international language, which is, I mean, or foreign language, which is basically the same thing as, it's basically a literal translation of the English. Yeah, test of Russian as a foreign language. Um, and the way that these levels work is a little bit funky. So the TOEFL level 1 roughly corresponds, let's say, fairly, I mean, this is how they kind of correlate. This is how the institute correlates and that does these tests. They correlate a level 1 to a B1 level. So if you want to do the TOEFL level 1, that's already fairly demanding. That's not kid stuff. This is no longer tourist stuff. That's already enough to study. And I think most Russian universities require this B1 to study. So even with this level, you already have enough to enter university. That's like the minimum to enter a Russian university. So that's already fairly demanding in itself. Level two then is correlated to B2, and this is enough to graduate from university. So this will actually be enough for you to graduate from a Russian university. Other countries or other languages do this a little bit differently. In Germany, for example, you usually need, most German universities will require a C1 to enroll in a university. And then once you're enrolled, then they assume that your German is at a good enough level to go through the rest of the university. So most German universities will require a C1 certificate before you can even enroll. In Russia, they do it a bit differently. In Russia, they say, okay, let's start you off at B1, and hopefully in your several years in university, your Russian will climb up to a B2 level. In the meantime, you'll need B2 to graduate. Um, then TOEFL level three is then obviously C1, and here this is very demanding. I would say even even people who have been studying Russian for many years, like there are people who've been studying Russian for 10 years and they have difficulty with this exam. So this is incredibly demanding. I would say think twice before setting this as a goal for yourself, and then the final exam, the TOEFL 4, which is considered equivalent to a C2 level. Um, I can tell you right now that most native Russian speakers would probably fail this exam. Maybe not most. Maybe saying most is not correct, but at least a lot of them, a lot of native Russian speakers would fail this exam. This exam is insane. It's absolutely insane. Um, and also, what the TOEFL exam does, especially at the higher levels, it does something that's not common. Like other languages will usually focus on language learning, but the TOEFL 4 especially, it does something kind of weird. It's actually not just about the Russian language. It actually has questions about Russian literature as well. Like you need to know the most famous Russian works of literature and what happened in them, like what the plot structure is and what characters there were and things like that, because it will actually ask questions about that, which is a little weird. Like it doesn't really belong in a language test. It's supposed to be a language test, and they start asking questions about Russian literature and history. So it's a little bit, yeah. I mean, similar exams, like a C2 level exam for French or German, would not do that. They're not going to start asking about French or German literature and history. That's not part of the exam. So the Russians do it a little bit differently. But okay, but that aside, I mean, but just talking about the linguistic aspect of it, even just talking about the linguistics, I think a lot of native Russian speakers would fail this exam. So think twice before setting your sights on these last two. They are absolutely insane. Obviously, they're not impossible. There are people, of course, there are non-native Russian speakers who have passed these exams. It's not impossible. It's just incredibly demanding. It is really like, don't underestimate these exams. They are incredibly difficult. And if you're learning Russian, and especially if you're at a point where you've just gone through, through this website, I would say for just focus on these two for now, because this is really, even these two are going to be a lot of work for you. They're going to be very challenging for you. So, yeah, the thing is, um, again, Russian is more difficult than most other languages, so I think that's part of it. I think that's why they kind of grade these a little bit differently. Like the Russian B2 exam is probably it's probably about as difficult as a French or German C1 exam would be, and the Russian C1 exam is probably about as difficult as a French or German C2 exam would be. That's just roughly my guess. That's just sort of, I haven't actually taken a TOEFL exam, but I've read about people who have, and that's just sort of how I would gauge it based on what I've seen and read and experienced personally. Um, so yeah, what I would like to do, like if I were in your stage right now, having finished these videos, what I personally would really love to do is just pick up a real Russian novel and just read it. So, pick up something from Tolstoy or Dostoevsky or Chekhov or Pushkin or whatever, and just start reading it. But you probably won't be able to. I mean, if you want to try it, of course you can try, but I don't think you'll be able to. Your vocabulary just probably won't be up to it. Um, and the thing is, whenever I speak with Russians, like whenever I speak with Russians and they ask how I'm learning Russian, I tell them I tried reading something from Dostoevsky. they always say the same thing to me. They say, "Hey, man, that stuff is difficult for us to read." So that's the thing. It's not the case that people say that all languages are equally difficult. People say that all native speakers of a language have the same sort of level of aptitude and acuity in their language. I don't think that's the case. I think that Russian is inherently a more difficult language than languages like English or French or Spanish. And so I think that even native Russian speakers will have more difficulty with Russian literature than a native English speaker, for example, would have with English literature. But again, that's just my impression. So yeah. Um, if you're going to continue learning the language, I would say think about what you want to do with it. So most of these exams, like I mean, like the TOEFL exams and other exams, other formal language exams, they usually are divided into broadly into four different skills. There's reading, there's writing, there's listening, and there's speaking. So you'll have a reading comprehension part where you need to read something and then answer questions about the text you've read. There's a writing portion where you need to write an essay or possibly several essays on different things. There's listening where you'll hear recordings of people speaking and then you need to explain what they talked about, what they said. Sometimes you have to go into pretty serious detail about what they discussed. And then speaking. There's a spoken portion where you will have an examiner and you'll have to have a conversation with them and they will gauge how well you can speak the language. So these are like the four basic fundamental language skills. And I guess kind of the question is which one of them do you want to do? If you really want to be fluent and proficient in a language, of course, you need to be able to do all four. But there are people who say, I have no intention of living in Russia. I don't want to speak to Russian people. I want to be able to read Russian literature. I want to be able to read Tolstoy or Dostoevsky or whatever. Okay, if that's your goal, then obviously reading is, just practice reading. Writing is, of course, more difficult. It's more difficult to write something than to read something. And then, listening and speaking, there are people who don't like reading, but they like to chat, they like to talk. And so there are some people who practice languages or learn languages by talking with people. And what happens then is that they're good at conversation, like they can actually speak very well, but they don't write very well. So, it kind of goes both ways. There are people who are more bookish and then they end up learning to read and write well, but they can't speak well. There are people who are more social and more chatty and gregarious, and then they speak well, but they don't write well. So, kind of depends. Again, I would ask yourself what you want to do. Like, what do you really want to do with Russian at this point? And again, if you really want to be proficient, if you're thinking about living in Russia, or even if you don't want to live in Russia, you just want to really engage with the language, then again, you probably need to do all four of these. But it's not necessarily the case that all people will need to do all four of these. Okay, so getting into materials, like talking about specific materials that I would recommend or that people often recommend. Let's go and get started with books. So, what you'll see time and time again when people talk about books for learning Russian, this sort of people's usual go-to book for learning Russian is it's called the New Penguin Russian Course. Now, I wouldn't say that this book is excellent. It's not bad. I mean, it's not a bad book. I think the reason why this book comes up again and again is just because there is unfortunately a lack of there is really a lack of good resources for learning Russian. And so this book sort of stands out from the rest, not because the book itself is so excellent, but just because everything else is not as good. Everything else is worse. So, if you like learning with books, then then I would obviously suggest learning with this. Um, I mean, if you just look it up online, you'll be able to find it easily. Like it's a common book. Um, I guess it would help to. I'm just looking it up now. I'm just going to quickly say because I don't remember the author's name off the top of my head. Okay, so it's written by Nicholas J. Brown. Let's go ahead and just copy that in here. By Nicholas J. Brown, obviously published by Penguin, as you can probably guess from the name. And yeah, this book is readily found on, stores in online bookstores. I've seen it in physical bookstores. I would say it's this is probably one of the most prominent books that people think about when they think about books for learning Russian. I really can't recommend much else. I mean, if you just go on to Amazon or wherever and just start looking for books on Russian, you'll find lots of books, but there don't seem to be any other books that are really widely used or really widely recommended. One book that I'll just mention in passing. There's a company called Asimi, and they have a series called With Ease, and I just like the series because it's notable to me as one of the few book series which are ambitious enough to actually try to get you to the B2 level. There are so many books which just get you to like A1 and A2, which is fine, but again, at this point, if you've really understood everything on the Learn Russian website, you're probably beyond the A level. You probably want to start getting into B levels at that point. By the way, speaking of that, this book here, the New Penguin Russian Course, it's a little bit funny. Um, the introduction of this book says that it aspires to get readers up to their A levels. And that is a very unfortunate wording based on sort of historical events and the fact that I think the author is British. So if you read that and see, okay, the book wants to get you to your A level exams, you might assume that it means these, because today when people talk about learning languages, there's this A1 to C2 structure. The thing is, when Mr. Brown first wrote this book, this book is kind of old. Like the book is actually, I think it was written for, even though it's called the New Penguin Russian Course, I think the book was actually written relatively recently after the breakup of the Soviet Union. So this is like sometime in the 1990s. So it is kind of old. Let me see. Can I find the copyright date on the book? When was this actually written? When was this book written? 1996. So the book is a little bit older, and I think at that point in time, it was not as much in vogue to learn languages as it is now, and so I don't think they had this structure. And so when the author, Mr. Brown, refers to A levels, what he's talking about is the British A level exams that are kind of what people do when they finish high school in Britain, which are actually more equivalent to like a B1 or B2. So actually, this book will probably also take you to not to the A1 or A2 of the European reference framework here. It will probably take you to like a B1 or B2 on this scale, which is kind of a very unfortunate choice of words that did not anticipate that this structure would come into popularity in the near future. So again, the Asimi with Ease series, they're notable to me as one of the few books which are ambitious enough to try to get you to the B2 level. Like they claim it'll take you to the B2 level. I'm skeptical of that. I really don't think that it takes you that far, but there are endless books. There's so many books that go to like A1 and A2, and you're done with that, man. If you've done the Learn Russian website, you're out of A1, A2 territory. You're into B territory. And there's just such a lack of good resources there. So even this, if you read this book, like I said, this is a pretty decent book. Like it's not a bad book. Um, but even this book will mostly repeat things that you already know. If you go through the book, you'll say, oh, hey, I remember all this stuff from the Learn Russian website. I've actually already read all about this stuff before. So the book probably doesn't have much that's new for you. I would still suggest the book because it's probably one of the better books out there for learning Russian. But if you've actually done and understood everything on the Learn Russian website, you are almost at the point where you've outgrown books like this and this as well. Like this, I doubt that this will actually take you to B2 level. If you go through this book, you should be maybe starting to get into B1, but I don't think you could actually pass a B2 exam. Like I really doubt you would pass the TOEFL 2 with that alone. But that's just my opinion. I don't know. I haven't tried it. Um, so yeah, in terms of books, I can't really think of any other books to recommend. If anybody has any suggestions, please, you're welcome to post them in the comments. But again, there's such a lack of good books for learning Russian that I can't really recommend a lot. Um, what I personally like is dual readers. There are, a dual readers meaning Books where, like, there's a story or some text and it's written in one language on the left page and in a different language on the right page. So you can read them in parallel. You can read, like, if you're learning Russian, you can read some story in Russian, and then on the right side there'll be the English translations and kind of read them in parallel. I personally like those, but they're kind of hard to find. Like, they're surprisingly hard to find, and I don't know if there are any standard ones. Like, there are a few of them, but they are a little bit difficult to find, in my opinion. Like, they're not that popular. So that's all I want to say about books. In terms of apps, there are different, like, learning apps for smartphones and stuff like that. I mean, obviously Duolingo is popular. Duolingo is not bad, but I think it's overrated. I mean, people debate how useful Duolingo really is for learning a language. I think it's not bad. I think it's not a bad resource, but it shouldn't be your only resource. Again, Duolingo is not going to take you much beyond where you are already. It's okay for, for kind of, it's okay for fun. I mean, it's probably useful in some way, but I wouldn't just, like, go through Duolingo and say you're learning the language. I don't think that's the best way to learn the language. Other people like stuff like Memrise. I don't know, I've tried. I don't really find it that useful. I personally like Closemaster. What Closemaster is, basically, it gives you a sentence in the language you want to learn, but there's a word missing, and then you just have to, in context, you have to put in the word. So yeah, you kind of have to understand what word goes in the blank, and then just fill in the blank with the correct word, which is kind of nice because it lets you learn one word at a time. Like, you kind of have to, for each sentence, there's like that one word you have to learn. And it sorts the tasks in terms of most common words. Like, there's like the 100 most common words in the language, then there's the 1,000 most common words, and there's the 2,000 most common words. And so you kind of, learn the most common vocabulary first and you go from there. I think it's a pretty cool system. I like it personally, but I don't see a lot of people using it. I don't know why. I wasn't paid to advertise it. It's just something that I kind of seen that I personally like using. Um, and then yeah, and then in terms of websites. Now, the thing is, if you start talking about websites for learning Russian, in my opinion, one of the best websites is this one. It's the one that we've been working with, which is why I made these videos. I mean, the reason why I started making these videos is because RT's Learn Russian site, it really takes you through everything in terms of grammar. It really does teach you all the things that you would learn in a standard Russian course about all the different grammar points. All this, all these things like verbs of motion is a huge thing. All the stuff about the participles that we had so much trouble with. All the things about, everything that you see in this course. It's not just something that somebody dreamed up, just kind of pulled out of the air and said, hey, let's turn that into a course. These are actually the standard things that you learn when learning Russian. And so, in any other kind of course or website or book or whatever, you're going to see those same themes repeated again and again. And that's why I like this site, because it's free. It's it's a little bit authoritative because it's from RT, which is, Russia's big sort of media owned, not media owned, a government owned media outlet. It's free, and it's actually it's quite comprehensive. Like, it really is surprisingly comprehensive. Um, so yeah, there's not much, in my opinion, that's as good as that site. But if you want to see some other stuff, I don't know. One thing that I've been kind of going through a bit lately is there's a site called OpenRussian.org, and they have vocabulary lists for all the different levels. Like, if you go to B1, for example, right now, you'll see a list of a few hundred words which they think you should know for the B1 level, which is maybe useful if you just want to memorize words. And of course, you can change this part of the URL to A1, A2, B2, C1, C2, and you'll see suggested list there. But it's not authoritative. I don't really know where they got the lists from. It seems to me like it's just something somebody thought up. Um, it's if you just want to learn words, I guess it's an interesting idea. But I mean, in terms of other stuff, a common site where I think people start is just RussianLessons.net. Kind of a good place to start. It's not it's okay. I think it's decent as a starter point. Um, Another site that people tend to like is RussianForFree.com. It has maybe a little bit more content to it, like it's kind of maybe takes a little bit farther. There's RussianForEveryone.com. This one has quite a lot of content to it. Like this, if you like to, if you want some more, this has a fair bit to it. Um, and then there's the other one, which is it kind of looks interesting. There's MasterRussian.com, which, as the name implies, intends to be like a more advanced site for more advanced learners. In my opinion, it doesn't seem that advanced, but I guess that it's I don't know, it's a matter of opinion. I mean, it's not a beginner's site. I guess it's like maybe intermediate stuff, which it's okay. I mean, these are some, and of course, you just go on Google and just do a search, you'll find other stuff. But these are actually the sites that come up when you do a Google search, which is why I'm listing these, because these are like the most commonly used sites, which will probably come up first if you do a Google search on Learn Russian or Russian lessons or something like that. Um, and I'm skeptical of things like music and films and TV. Like a lot of people say you learn best by learning from music. I really don't think that's the case because songs tend to use a very specific sort of lyric structure because they want to fit the song text into the song. So it's like they want to people don't speak in real life the way they do in song lyrics. So I'm kind of skeptical that music. I mean, Russian music is great. Like if you like Russian music, then Russian music is wonderful. But I'm skeptical of its usefulness for learning a language. And then stuff like movies and TV. A lot of people learn languages by watching movies or TV shows. That's good in terms of speaking, like that. If you really do a lot of it, you will probably pick up speech patterns and how people speak. But again, you probably won't be able to write. And especially Russian spelling. The problem is Russian orthography is very difficult because there are a lot of vowels that sound similar, like the e and the ikratki. They sound pretty much the same, or the sh and the sh. They also sound almost the same, or the e and the I are often pronounced almost identically. So you're going to have a very hard time spelling Russian correctly if you learn it through movies and TV. If you like movies and TV, you can watch them, and they might help. But I wouldn't rely on it because if you're going to need to write at any point in time, your spelling will probably be atrocious. Um, so it's kind of your personal style. Different people have different learning styles, and how they learn. How you learn is up to you. Like you need to know how you learn best. Um, but yeah, that's all I really have to say. I mean, those are resources that I can recommend. But in terms of, again, coming back to the fundamental question, where do we go from here? Where do you go from here with Russian? It's kind of up to you. You need to think about. Maybe you already know. Maybe you already have an idea in your head of what you want to do next. But if you don't, I would encourage you to spend some time thinking about what you really want to do. Do you want to get better at reading and writing Russian, or do you want to get better at understanding spoken Russian and speaking Russian? Or is it all of them? Is it all of the above? In which case, then you just need practice. What you're going to need is a lot more practice. In any case, whatever you do, you will need a lot more practice because at this point, there's not so much to learn in an academic way. It's really now just applying the language, getting used to how to use the language, learning more words to enlarge your vocabulary and stuff like that. Again, if you've come this far, like if you've actually gone through all 100 lessons on the site, you've made tremendous progress, and my congratulations to you because that is a lot of work. And you already have a pretty good grasp on the fundamentals of Russian. But what you need now is practice, and a lot of practice, because you cannot really fluently speak and use a language unless you practice it. So yeah, that's the thing. Like if you actually want to try tackling these exams, like I say, they're not impossible, but I would say you will not pass these exams if you don't actively use the language with probably with native Russian speakers. because there are spoken portions in these. Like you need to be able to speak and write. It's not just like read a page of text and understand it. You need to actively use the language and apply it. And I don't think you can do that if you haven't had extensive interaction with native speakers of the language. Um, it's going to be very difficult to really master these levels if you don't live in Russia. But if you're really determined, it's possible. It just means you're going to have to make it like a focus of your life. You're going to, for a long time, you're going to need to kind of center your life around learning Russian because this is going to have to be your whole life for a couple of years or even longer, depending on how long it takes you to learn. So unless you want to live in Russia, I would, if you're going to take a Russian exam, I would focus on these two for now. Even these are very demanding. Like don't underestimate how difficult these are. Don't think that just because this is the so-called level one certificate that it's easy. It is not easy. It is not simple. Even just doing stuff like this is very demanding. It's very challenging. If you're not a native speaker, you will have a hard time with these tests. These tests would give even native speakers a hard time. So again, please don't underestimate how seriously difficult this stuff is. Um, as far as what I'm going to do next, in terms of stuff like these videos that I've been making, I've thought about it. This will probably be the last video on this channel. As far as I'm concerned, this project is complete. The purpose of this project of making these videos was just to show the contents from RT's Learn Russian series. It was just to give you the answers, serve as kind of an answer key to those videos. And so I think this channel has run its course. I've done what I wanted to do with the channel. Theoretically, I could make more videos, or maybe I might. I've thought about maybe would I open up a different channel for more stuff about learning Russian. But the thing is, there are already so many of those on YouTube anyway. There are tons of native Russian speakers on YouTube giving you videos about how to speak and learn Russian. And I'm obviously not a native Russian speaker, so it wouldn't make much sense for me to start trying to teach people how to learn Russian, because if you're going to learn it, it's probably better to learn from an actual Russian speaker, because I do still sometimes have quirks in my pronunciation. I sometimes pronounce things wrong. There are obviously a lot of words that I don't know. Yeah, there's just the depth or the quality of instruction that I could give in terms of Russian is just, it's not very, there's not much I could say beyond what we've already seen in these videos. So if anybody has any suggestions or any requests or anything, I'm open to requests and suggestions, but again, this will probably be the last video on this channel. I'm probably done with teaching Russian for now. I just really wanted to get through these lessons. That's kind of all I really wanted to do with this channel. So I'm done here. Do some thinking about what you would really like to do, because the choice is yours. The future is open, and where you want to go with learning a language is up to you. It really all depends on why you want to learn the language, what you want to do with it. Again, if you already know, then good, then go for it. Make yourself a goal and go for it. But if you don't know yet, then give yourself some thinking time, have a think about it, and decide what you want to do and where you want to go from here. It's really your individual decision. It's totally up to you. So anyway, I am done here. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope that you've enjoyed these videos. I appreciate your views, and I haven't gotten a lot of comments, but the people who did comment, I appreciate them. And yeah, take care, everyone, and yeah, enjoy your language skills. Enjoy the journey and the adventure of learning Russian or whatever languages you might decide to learn in the future. Take care, everyone, and пока-пока.